just want to read this to you from page 388 of The Path. Now, this is in response to Alfred Lord Tennyson. Lord, yes, I don't know if that's his name, was it? Is his middle name Lord? Amazing. Anyway, Tennyson, poet, English. He said, "A kind of waking trance, this for lack of a better word, I've frequently had, quite up from boyhood, when I have been all alone. This has come upon me through repeating my own name to myself, silently, till all at once, as it were, out of the intensity of the consciousness of individuality itself seemed to dissolve and fade away into boundless being. And this not a confused state, but the clearest, the surest of the surest, utterly beyond words, where death was an almost laughable impossibility. The loss of personality, if so it were, seeming no extinction, but the only true life." Okay, anyway. On another occasion, he added, "It is no nebulous ecstasy, but a state of transcendent wonder associated with absolute clearness of mind." And then Kriyananda adds a comment, "Self-consciousness itself becomes infinite." So, in that case, you would say, I would think, the egoic awareness is not so much an awareness, but a lack of awareness. In other words, a very limited, narrowed ego, constrained to, ignoring much of the consequences to other people. Only that which one is registered and felt oneself. You know, pain is a personal thing, isn't it? You don't actually feel my pain. You may empathize and know what I mean, but you're not feeling the pain at the minute in the same way as I'm feeling the pain, say. So, I think we should be just clearer on what ego means. We've come to use the word to mean a narrow view of self. And we're much happier when this narrow view is made less narrow and it embraces someone we love and care for. And the wider that view is, the happier, the more peaceful and transcendent things seem to be. So we come back to Tennyson's statement, transcendent wonder associated with the absolute clearness of mind. An amazing awareness, whereas we're normally only aware of much narrower concerns, narrower to what we see and experience and wrestle with from day to day. So, it's not that the ego is innately bad, it's that it can be severely handicapped by a narrowness of grasp, and we want it to be enlarged, and as it enlarges we find there's a great joy and a peace and happiness and absolute clearness of mind, transcendent wonder. Wow, what a beautiful phrase. Okay, so we're not destroying the ego, on the contrary, we're trying to nurture it back to its wholesome fullness. We're trying to encourage it to blossom into the great awareness that it should be, instead of its present narrow confines. How's that? Thank you, Dad. Well, I've been unusually reminded of Psalm 119. Let me just refer to that a moment. It's an astonishing psalm, and it's, if you like, the Hebrew ancient way of handling the problem of the ego. The ego narrows us down to a way of life that desperately needs rescuing. Hence, people have seen the ego to be evil only because they've only seen it in its narrowness. And the solution to rescuing it in its dilemma is the guidance of God, you see. What are his laws and testimonies and precepts and so forth? And that's what Psalm 119 is about. It's an astonishing construction. It has every line refers to something like commandment, precept, rules. It always includes the word for rule or guidance or commandment and so on. And it's the longest psalm in the book, and it's almost central. Not sure which one's quite central. I'm not sure whether I think it's Psalm 18 might be central. The shortest might be Psalm 117 and so on. But far more convincing is that if you take the Hebrew letters to also be numbered, Aleph is 1 and so on, alpha, A, B, C, D, the equivalent in Hebrew. If you give the letters their numbers, you see an extraordinary number pattern appearing in this psalm. And I don't know if there are different variations on the psalm that would therefore affect the number pattern, but if you were a numerologist, which I'm not, you'd be fascinated apparently by how on earth anybody could have written Psalm 119. Well, that's it as I've received it, and you might be interested to go down that way, but it's probably a byroad. What isn't a byroad is the spiritual content of the psalm itself, which is not some heavy rule book, although it looks ostensibly to be exactly that, the epitome of a rule book, but God's rescue by giving us guidance. Again, you see, what we translate as commandment is really precept or guidance, rules to live by, to help us in situations that we really don't have the wherewithal to make good decisions. We should fall back on the rules when we really don't know what's best. Of course, that relies on the rules being faithfully given to us and so on, and that's always going to be arguable in an uncertain world. But let me have a look at it for a moment. Notice it's grouped into, like the first one's headed Aleph, which is the letter of the alphabet, Hebrew, of course. Aleph, of course, being the first is always indicative of God. Hebrew language was astonishing in that you could look at how a word is spelt, and because of the letters used in the spelling, you would know or have some idea of what the word might mean. You might not know whether it was a positive or negative example of, or whatever the quality of the word was meant to be, but it starts to put you on track. And there are apparently other languages like this, but English is certainly not it, of course. English is appalling cacophony of various sources, and That's why, of course, I use and have tried to encourage a phonetic alphabet. My one I call sound spelling, and I name my recordings, as you can see, accordingly, phonetically, according to the simplified rules of consistent phonetic spelling that I use and that I've put together hopefully to make things better. It's probably redundant now in that increasingly people are not going to be writing, they're going to be just recording like I am here. I'm not writing anymore, I record. Anyway, that's enough. Come back to the point. Psalm 119, blessed are the undefiled in the way, who walk in the law of the Lord. So the opening stanza basically sets the scene, doesn't it? It's the law of the Lord, meaning his guidance, his direction, his help. Meant to be his blessing, you see, not some terrible, burdensome constraint. It's his blessing. If you see the Lord, God, as loving and kind, anyway. If you see him as some ghastly, frightening, dictatorial monarch, then you might tremble at the law. But we don't tremble at the law. They're principles to live by. They've been given to us in sheer kindness to guide and help us in our childish ways. Blessed are the undefiled, in other words, pure, those that are seeking the right direction in the way. They're in the way, in a good sense. They're on their way. You know, Jesus is the way. You know, right back from, it's the same sort of approach, isn't it? He's help. I've come as help. This is the way. Follow me. Keep to the path. These are the rules. Keep to the path. Verse 2. Blessed. Incidentally, we're going through two blessings here. Blessed makes me think of the Beatitudes, yeah? Blessed are they that keep his testimonies and that seek him with a whole heart. So his testimony is his view, his declaration. You're blessed if you keep these, if you remember them, if you keep them to the fore in your mind, and seek him with your whole heart. Not just your mind, you see, but your desire, your love, your emotions, your living life element within you, your very heart. You're blessed if you seek him with your whole heart. Oh, it's already saying, isn't it? Love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind and strength. Verse 3, they also do iniquity. They walk in his ways. Do you see? Still of testimonies and commandments and so on. Walk in his ways. His ways are the testimonies and so forth, aren't they? Do you see? His commandments, his guidance, his laws. Every verse is going to have something like that. It's the word precept in verse 4. Thou hast commanded us to keep thy precepts diligently. Oh, well, we're coming the heavy here, aren't we? Command, that's military and you don't disobey, and it's a fear thing, isn't it? But his precepts, outlined ways of guidance, diligently. Do it with your whole heart. Do it diligently. See, we're back to that. Verse 5, oh, that my ways were directed to keep thy statutes. Now, instead of laws, you see? Then shall I not be ashamed when I have respect unto all thy commandments. I will praise thee with an uprightness of heart when I shall have learned thy righteous judgments. I will keep thy statutes. O forsake me not utterly. And then we get to the next section. So they're in couplets of 8 verses, aren't they? Beth, which is the second letter, obviously, B, if you like. Wherewithal shall a young man cleanse his ways? There's a question, and it gives you the answer in the same verse, and it's got to come up with something like commandments or statutes. By taking heed thereto according to thy word. You know, your words are your commandments, your statutes, your guidance, your diligence, your directing, rather. With my whole heart have I sought thee. Verse 10. O let me not wander from thy commandments. Thy word have I hid in my heart, that I might not sin against thee. Oh, so it's word this time, isn't it? Thy word again. Blessed art thou, O Lord, teach me thy statutes. With my lips have I declared all the judgments of thy mouth. Judgments. I've rejoiced in the way of thy testimonies. I will meditate in thy, as much as all riches. Verse 15, I will meditate in thy precepts, and have respect unto thy ways. I will delight myself in thy statutes. I will not forget thy word. And then we get to verse 17, Gimel. Deal bountifully with thy servant, that I may live and keep thy word. So there's the prayer of prayer, isn't it? Deal bountifully. In other words, be kind and generous. Please bless me. Thy servant. Well, we wouldn't say servant now, we'd say child that loves you. Well, we wouldn't even ask because we know he's going to do it, but that I may live, that's life eternal, isn't it? And keep thy word. I'm going to be in harmony with you, aren't I? So there's 17 for you. Well, and so you go through, but you can do that yourself, and perhaps you've a mind to. But it's a fascinating psalm. And I felt this recording somehow should be named, therefore, Psalm 119. For the psalm essentially addresses the problem of the ego, the narrowness, the lack of understanding we have, the very narrow view of self which needs to be rescued. And the law, if you like, or these commandments, statutes, precepts, guidance, this every line of Psalm 119 is in some sense meant to help free you from this narrowness of ego, this misunderstanding of where you are, and this lack of knowing the way, because our eyes are more than half shut and we don't see it. So we need guidance. What do I do here? Give me a rule. Guide me, Lord. And Psalm 119, I think, in a sense, could or even should be seen in this light. It has the mark of being supernaturally given to us in its structure. It's bewildering, as I say, that man could write such a psalm. And it all makes sense. I mean, more than makes sense. Present to many, many people as far more than just coherent, but actually valuable. I remember I was teaching in Suffolk, and it hit me at some point. This is decades ago. I must have been something like, don't know, 28, 29, 30, I was teaching, and I realized that it was an amazing psalm. It was there to help and guide us in holiness. What is holiness? Well, ultimately, it's actually having God's mind instead of our narrow mind. What we call ego is just a narrow understanding, a narrow mind. And what we need and what we worship and love and value is God's complete, vast, open mind. And Psalm 119 seems designed to come to the rescue of us. Thank you, Dad.